Namaskar and welcome back to my channel. Happy fall if you're celebrating. I'm not because I hate every single season but summer. Still, I have quite a few romances that I want to recommend if you're looking for something to read this fall. Historical romances are the type of romances that I read the most throughout fall and winter. My recent favorites are Passions of a Wicked Earl by Lorraine Heath. Lorraine Heath is truly the queen of a very scandalous synopsis and a surprisingly sweet romance. The two books that I've read from her and that I want to recommend encapsulate this concept perfectly. The story follows Morgan and Claire. Their marriage started from a wrong foot. They were betrothed for the majority of their childhood because of their fathers, but they were never close, and Claire mostly spent time with Morgan's brother, Stephen. When Morgan's father died, he realized that he's the elder in the family now and he needs to provide somehow. Claire is very convenient out of the situation because of her dowry, so he decides to keep up the word that their fathers gave to each other and marry her. Claire is very much against the idea because she doesn't know Morgan very well and is scared of him because he's older and pretty grumpy. So she and Stephen come up with the dumbest plan. They decide to pretend that they have an affair in hopes of deterring Morgan. Morgan is indeed deterred, but not in a way Claire expected. They remain married and he sends her to the country. He and Stephen get into a big fight and are no longer on speaking terms. 3 years later, Claire's desperate father decides to marry off her little sister to a very unseemly gentleman. They both manage to change his mind and reconsider, at least for one season. If she's not going to succeed, then she will have to marry who her father had chosen for her. Claire realizes that because of her rancid reputation and the failed marriage that she has with Morgan that is constantly on people's lips, her little sister is not going to find the person that she wants. And she decides to sacrifice herself to go back to Morgan and beg him for forgiveness. This is a marriage in trouble book and I found it very refreshing. As I told you, it sounds very salacious and scandalous from the synopsis, but the relationship between Morgan and Claire is very sweet despite the initial resentment between them. I love that they as a couple had an actual conflict that they had to work through, that they had to use all their communication skills to finally be together and to turn the page and stop mulling over the betrayal that they both felt. I loved the element of meddling relatives in this one. Morgan's mother is an absolute icon and I love her very much. I think she is the highlight of this book and in the other books because it's a trilogy and every single book follows one of her sons. I recommend this book if you value romances about people figuring things out and working on their relationship, not starting a new one. Another book from Lorraine Heath that I recommend is from the same series. It's Waking Up with the Duke. And I gotta say that the premise of this one is even more salacious. This is a story about the third brother, Ransom. He and his best friend Wolford got into an accident while driving a carriage. Wolford got paralyzed. He now uses a wheelchair and can no longer use his legs. His wife, Jane, was pregnant at the time and lost her baby because of all the worrying. Because of his injury, Wolford can't have kids and doesn't have an heir. He knows that Jane really likes kids and really wanted some when they married, so he asks Ransom to provide her with kids. This premise is absolutely buck wild, and I know that it's going to turn off a lot of people. It's going to turn on some other people that are absolutely my friends because I indeed do love a spicy synopsis. Not surprisingly, Jane is very against the idea. She doesn't want to sleep with anyone that isn't her husband. Despite them never having a very loving relationship, she loves him and she treats her marriage vows very seriously. She also hates Ransom because she believes Ransom is the reason why her husband got into the accident in the first place. Ransom, though, was in love with her since he met her and is struggling with the morality of loving the wife of his best friend. Despite all the things that I've told you that might seem extremely dramatic, Lorraine Heath has written a very sweet and very gentle romance. I'm sure that this book is polarizing among the reviewers. I personally really loved it. I think that she had done a really good job at building these characters and convincing the readers that these two people have to be together. I like this one even more than the first one, and that was definitely unexpected. Let's move on to other authors. The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Ridley is perfect for fall or winter. The book follows Philippa and Tommy. Philippa is a sheltered wallflower. Her parents really want to marry her off to a gentleman because they are pretty rich, but they don't have a title, and as we all know, it's very important, or it was very important at the time. Tommy comes from a very eccentric family. They were all orphans until a gentleman decided to adopt them, and every single one of them has a special talent. Tommy's talent is being able to transform into anyone, and in this book she pretends to be a young man to get the Wonder Bean inheritance, the inheritance of the man that adopted them. She's been in love with Philippa for a long while now, and at the promenade, she finally gathers some courage to talk to her in her new barren form. Philippa, for the first time, finds herself fascinated with a man, and the conversation flows very easily. She even catches herself on being attracted to this man, even though before she never found men appealing at all. Quite quickly into Tommy confesses that she's not Baron Wonderbean, that Baron Wonderbean doesn't exist, and she's been pretending to be him to get the family's inheritance. Philippa is deeply fascinated by Tommy's talents, and they come up with a plan. Tommy is going to continue to court Philippa so she would get her parents off her back for a little bit. It's overall a genius plan, except Philippa falls for Tommy and now they have to figure out what to do. This is such a fast read. It's the second book in the series and I have not read the first one, but I fell in love with Tommy's family either way, and the romance between Philippa and Tommy was so swoony. I really liked it. I highly recommend this book. Pick it up. The most autumnal Tessa book that I've read so far is When the Scot Ties a Knot. The story is very in line with the season in my opinion because of how much time the couple spends outside in windy cold weather and how much the elements affect their romance. You know what I mean if you read the book. The story follows Maddie. She's nerdy, she's into sciences, she likes biology. She's extremely socially anxious though, and she prefers to spend time at home. The idea of a season frightens her, so she makes up Captain Mackenzie that she supposedly met somewhere and that courts her. Captain Mackenzie is a made-up suitor that is supposedly at war and that is going to come back and marry her when time comes. Her relatives believe her. She's been showing them his letters that she'd written herself, but at some point the light becomes too big and she decides to kill him. She writes herself a letter about his demise at war. A few years pass. She inherits the house of her relatives in the Highlands and becomes an independent lady that spends most of her time studying nature and animals. But then Captain Mackenzie appears at her doorstep. It turns out that there is an actual Captain Mackenzie that has been getting her letters and that decided to use this situation to his advantage. After he came back from war, he realized that he doesn't have a place in society anymore, and there she is, a woman that has been writing to him that he can marry and whose house he can claim, and she cannot refuse him without starting a scandal. I personally really love this kinds of plots where people are thrown into a situation, into a relationship, and they have to figure out how to adapt it, how to communicate, if maybe they can build something out of it. It was very fascinating, but also I really liked the characters. I also loved how both of them were capable of grand schemes, and I think they're perfect for each other. I really like this book. The next historical that I want to recommend is Think of England by K.J. Charles. I've done a similar video, I think a year or 2 years ago. I'm going to link it in case you're looking for even more recommendations, but in that video I recommended the first book in the series. So in today's video we're continuing with this tradition. Think of England follows Archie, who is an ex-soldier who lost a lot in the war, specifically in one tragic accident. Arms that were shipped to the front lines blew up in the hands of some of his friends and they died. He also lost a few fingers, and for years he has been confident that something was weird about that situation. To investigate it, he visits a house of a man that produces weapons, a man that was a direct competitor of the guy that sent them the guns. Archie believes that this guy was the one that compromised the shipment. He's not the only guest at the house. The family hosts a few other people at the same time, and he meets a very interesting man named Daniel De Silva, who's a poet. He's very eccentric, very different, and he catches his eye. It turns out that they both are looking for something in the house. Because both Archie and Daniel compromise themselves in front of each other, they're both looking for something and they should have been sleeping instead. They decide to pair up and to investigate the guy together. This book is a bit darker than anything else I've read by K.J. Charles. There is more action in it and tension, and the characters actually end up being in danger. But I love both Archie and Daniel, especially Daniel. This book is very fast-paced, it's very engrossing, and I think that it's perfectly balanced when it comes to the mystery element and to the romance element. So that is why I really enjoyed it. This is all I wanted to mention in terms of the historical romances, and I want to move to the supernatural romances next. The first series that I want to recommend in this section writes the two genres. It's both historical romance and supernatural romance. It's Soulless by Gail Carriger. You know that I really like this series. It's fun and quirky and reminds me of the What We Do in the Shadows because it looks on the supernatural creatures from the point of view of humor. It's set in Victorian England, but not the Victorian England we're used to seeing in historical romances. This England has supernatural creatures that are part of society. Werewolves and vampires are out and everyone knows about them. 𝕊𝕼𝔻𝕀𝔸𝕃 is the protagonist of this book. She is a different kind of supernatural creature. She is a soulless. A soulless is a creature that doesn't have a soul, which means she cannot be turned into a supernatural creature, and it also means that when she touches a supernatural creature, they lose their supernatural abilities. Alexis is a very eccentric lady. She is a spinster and she likes it this way. At one of the outings, Alexis accidentally kills a vampire that attacks her, and a guy named Lord 𝕊𝕁𝕁𝕁, the alpha of the local werewolves, comes to investigate. Alexis and Lord 𝕊𝕁𝕁𝕁 have an ongoing conflict. They really don't like each other, but they're bound together by this investigation and have to work together despite not liking each other very much. This is such a camp series. As you can gather already, they fall in love and it's really fun. The supernatural element just brings so much joy and fun into the series, in my opinion. I genuinely really like it. I only have one book left in it. It's a 5-book series, and I think it's such a fun book to read when the weather is really nasty outside because it's such a good contrast. Gail Carriger has such an excellent sense of humor, and there are so many lovable characters in the series that I really got attached to. The series is very immersive, and the time that you put into it definitely pays off because of all the background storylines that are just as fascinating as the main storyline, and because of how much you fall in love with the characters, the secondary characters, the main characters, etc. I highly recommend it. It's an older series and it's finished, and it's just really cute. If you're looking for a supernatural read that is a little bit more smutty and is on the spicier side, I would recommend Better Off Red by Rebekah Weatherspoon. She truly is the master of a sexier romance, so to speak. This is the first in the series of vampire FF romances, and I had fun reading it. It's a bit more smutty than I usually like, and definitely is focused more on the relationship than on the plot, but if that's your vibe, you're going to love this book. The story follows a girl whose roommate at uni wants to join a sorority. She's a bit resistant of that, but at the end she decides to pledge. And the sorority that they want to join the most is actually a sorority of covert vampires. The protagonist might be reluctant about the idea at first, but then she falls for the leader of this sorority, the vampire queen, and the vampire queen also finds her very fascinating and feels the pull. There is a bit of a world building as well, and the author explains how these vampires work. There are some sex rituals in this book as well, which were the most interesting part of it, and I gotta say that I had a lot of fun reading it. If you're looking for something fun, supernatural, sapphic, and sexy, this is a perfect pick. Moving on to strictly contemporary romances, I want to recommend Just Like That by McCade as a moody, atmospheric read of choice. This is an romance about a guy that comes back to his hometown to be his ex-professor assistant. When he was younger, he had a crush on this professor, which was not reciprocated. It's not that kind of romance. The professor was very cold, and he was very closed off, which was part of his charm. And now when the hero comes back and starts working with him, he is introduced to him for the first time as an adult and has to sort out his feelings from the childhood obsession to a more balanced image. The atmosphere in this book is very much dark academia adjacent. The story takes place in academia, and the mood of it is very heavy and mysterious. You constantly feel like something is going to happen soon. It's also no doubt a romance because the main storyline is a romantic storyline between the hero and his new co-worker. There are some dark secrets that are revealed in the story. It's a really engrossing romance that I don't see being recommended a lot on other channels, so I wanted to bring it to your attention. And the last book that I want to recommend in this video is Murder Most Actual by Alexis Hall. If you're looking for a cozy mystery mixed with a romance this full season, this is the one, the book for you. It's a story about two wives that have been struggling with their relationship as of late. They barely spend time with each other because of their work, and they started fighting a lot. So one of them buys a ticket to a hotel outside of the city so they could relax, talk, spend some time with each other and reconnect. But their plans are halted because a murder takes place in the hotel, and all the guests have to figure out who has done it because, as it happens in these types of stories, the hotel gets snowed in. One of the wives is a true crime podcaster, so she decides to take investigation in her own hands, and while she is at it, she also is trying to work on her relationship with her partner. So it is a marriage in trouble book. I love those, as you can tell. I recommended 2 of them in this video, and I really liked how it was portrayed in this book. The conflict between them just grew slowly throughout the years, and every single little thing contributed. So it was interesting to see how they were trying to entangle the years of poor communication. The mystery part is nothing to write home about. It's very Clue-esque. It doesn't really matter who is the killer, because what matters in cozy mysteries, to be quite honest, I guess for me personally, but also I've heard it from other people, is the characters, how eccentric they are, and the story delivers on that front too. I enjoyed it, and I think if you like cozy mysteries with a romance, you're going to enjoy it as well. So these are all the books that I wanted to talk about in this video. If you're looking for more book recs, I'm going to link some in the description to this video. If you have any recommendations for me, you can also leave them in the comments down below, and you can leave an emoji of a full leaf if you want to support my channel. This is it for today. Thank you for watching this video. I hope to see you soon with another one, but until then,